their heart with prospective families. So that's going to be the session today. The role of the audience is going to be our prospective adoptive and foster families. So you have that green slip of paper, so you can ask questions throughout. There's going to be some Miriam's Heart folks that are able to take that from you. So please, I have some questions ready to go, but please feel free to ask your questions throughout the session, and we would love to get to them. So let me just introduce our panel here for you. We have Jimmy, Jessica, Chris, Michelle, and Anna. Their information is in the folder that you received, but their stories and their heart again will come out as we journey through these questions today. So thank you all for being here. The first question that I want to start with is a question that we get asked at every coffee fellowship that we have, and that's really the question of a cost with adopting. And so what I want to know is, how much does an adoption cost, and can you speak to some funding options for families?
Okay, it's on. You know, this is a question that I personally am asked a lot, and often as a man and being a provider of the family, this is a barrier that often can very quickly halt the process in people. And of course it's often the men, the husbands, that will hear and I heard that's expensive. And you know, we want to be able to talk that point out, because yes, international adoption can be expensive, and the range, depending on the country, is what often determines the expense. My wife Elizabeth and I adopted 2 times from South Korea, and the range probably there was the upper, you know, 25 to 30,000 probably. But the couple things to remember is, first, that it's done in phases, that it's not all at once, and the cliche of where God guides, He provides, has come to fruition in my life. And that can be in so many different ways, but I believe that the heart of God does not want money to stop us from adopting. That where He is calling us, He's going to provide, and there's a way. He's going to make a way. One way, the first time around, is we were able to get an adoption loan, which then allows budgeting, if you will, for our family to be able to afford paying back the adoption. The second time, we were able to start an adoption fund through Life Song for Orphans, a wonderful organization. And what that allowed us to do is, my wife blogged about it to our friends and family, and people then were able to journey with us. They were able to donate if they felt led, and they were able to partner in our adoption. And that is actually part of what kept us going at some of the tough moments when we were in Korea and we were meeting our son. And my wife, you know, I'm simple. You give me a child, I'm going to provide for him. I don't need so much emotion initially, but so I met my son, and okay, he's my son. I don't need to feel anything right now. After the laugh is over, I'll say, you know, the reality is that those feelings come, but at first you're strangers to each other. So it becomes this tough situation emotionally, and during those moments, the people that helped us in donations and prayer is what kept us going and reminded us that this is what we were called to, and everyone felt part of it. And so not only did we get financial assistance through that process, but also through prayer. So people just loved hearing about it. So you're able to do that with Life Song for Orphans. So that's another way. So men that come to me, I validate the expense, and I say, listen, I've been through it and I've lived through it, and because of that, I can share that yes, there's a way. If you feel a calling to do this, do not let money stop you. It's going to come, and I'd love to share that with anyone that would like to or moving forward. And I think my brother Chris would like to share a little bit too on that.
So not to repeat what Jimmy said, but it's a lot. But we'll get to the point, it's a lot. But take the dollar signs away, 25 to 35,000, what does that include? That's your travel, that's your post and pre house visits, could be a whole bunch of things depending on the country you're going to, depends how much you travel. But anytime you're into that, you want to ask questions, right? So the adoption agency that we were involved in, All God's Children in Guatemala, they laid out a good plan. And it wasn't, as Jimmy said, it's not all up front, it's in segments. But you knew where the money was and where it was going to, and you were able to budget the best you can. My company actually gave $500 because it's a stipend that they have for people who adopt, either internationally or domestic. Some large companies do it, some don't. But the great story I have is $20 here, $20 there. In my old church in Brooklyn, there was an old man there. Loved when we got up in front of the church and told the church, as Elizabeth said, tell your story, that this is where God was leading us. So every Sunday, he slipped me 20, like we were out in the street corner somewhere. And he didn't have much, but he had a heart. And he said that he prayed every few Sundays he'd give me 20. And I take that 20, I put it in an envelope, whether that was for a meal for us or whatever, that went to the final cost. But his heart was there, and it was the best he can do. And which every time he gave it, I'd break out in tears. So when I told him I didn't need it, he said this is what he wanted to do. So, as Jimmy said, the money will come. And you know what? If God is calling you to adopt, then He's calling you to, He's calling to tell you that He's going to interfere in your life. Interfere in your life means that it's going to be a little tough. And so, I'll be honest with you, a lot of my money to adopt came out of my 401k. And that was not cool with people that I work with. Because a 401k is for when I retire and set up a nest egg. What do you mean you're going to use that money to adopt? But that's what I did. Because that's where God was calling my heart, and during when me and my wife were praying. And so we took some of that money, a good portion, to fund that, if you can do that. But each person has a different story. Each person is in a different walk and has a different financial background. But as Elizabeth laid out before, there are other ways. But between myself and Jimmy, those are the things that we saw. Why God, and it really is a God-leading thing, and He does provide. And when that child is home with you, the blessings outweigh any dollar or cents that you can put to it.
Add that to Michelle, that would be great. I have a question for you.
Okay. Well, I wanted to share about the funding. When we have 3 children through adoption, and the first one was a private adoption, and we had 2 children at the time. So we took an overdraft line of credit out on the house. Great, let's do that. And it was great, we did that. When we felt led the second time, it definitely wasn't going to be able to do that. So we saved up, we had some money. My son was in Taekwondo at the time, and the instructor had, knew we were going to adopt, and he did a board break-a-thon and raised money through the board break-a-thon. And it went into the community, it was in the newspaper, we were getting checks from people we had never met before, and so other than just us, other people were blessed, because again, we were called to adopt, but they were called to help the fatherless, and that was their way of doing it. Then when it came to our third adoption, and we put some money into it, when it came to our third adoption, it just really wasn't going to be there. And so we get this little picture of this little boy that needs a mommy and a daddy, and so we're like, okay, God, you can do it. And so we did, and we did a spaghetti fundraiser, and we partnered, Life Song for Orphans blessed us with a grant. Johanna's Hope blessed us with a grant. The spaghetti fundraiser, there were people that I had never met that came just because it was in the paper. And we met Uncle Gus, who was Ethiopian, and my son was being adopted from Ethiopia, and his family now. He came to our house, he met us at the airport, he was able to introduce us to my son. It was amazing. So there are logistical ways to go about it as well. And people do want to help, and people do want to bless. So there are other ways to do it too.
Yes, Anne, please.
When my husband and I decided that we were ready to adopt, we have 2 biological daughters, and we decided to go locally through the foster care system. And the great thing about foster care is that the adoption generally doesn't cost you anything. It's a wonderful way to get a bigger family, get more kids, and they work with you and provide an attorney for you and take you through the process. So the cost is much easier to handle through the foster care.
Sure. While you're speaking, and you have that, I'm just going to go with you. Tell us why we should really consider the foster care program. Aside from financial reasons, what were some of the reasons that led you to go through the foster care program?
Well, I had, in a previous church, I had a pastor who had gone through the foster care system to adopt his son, and I got to meet some of the social workers. I got to meet some of his foster family, and we really made a great connection. And to have a heart, when you have a heart for Christ, and you get that call to take care of children, it's to be able to provide a child with some normalcy, with a Christ-centered home, to be able to give a child love between the time of crisis when they're taken from whatever situation they're in and then transferred into a situation that's going to be better. If you can give them that sense of normalcy, of family, of connection, it's really very fulfilling, and it's a wonderful thing to do. It was also a terrific thing for our family, our older 2 daughters, to be able to be hands-on caretakers to these lost little kids who really didn't know where they were going, from their home to our home to the next place. And watching my 5-year-old giving her favorite stuffed bunny to this little boy who was crying, and he was so scared he didn't want to eat his mac and cheese, and he was just so upset. And for her to make that connection, to see Christ working through her, was just fantastic. The folks over at DIFAS are really quite wonderful. When you take your education classes, they give you a lot of information, and one of the things that I found wonderful was that they really expect you to realize your limitations. A lot of folks who are thinking about foster care are saying, well, maybe I don't want a child who has any kind of medical condition, or maybe I don't want to do this or don't want to do that. And a lot of times we're thinking, oh, please, just give me a baby, just give me a kid, just give me. And not thinking about actually what we can handle. And they're very, very good about making sure that you set your limitations, that you understand, and that they resource you to medical help or to counseling help. They've always been wonderful with that. And I like the idea of helping my immediate community. That there were women who weren't able to keep their children. There were families that needed a break to be able to get their stuff together, and they didn't have immediate family to help them with their child, so that we could be that for them and love on their kid while they were getting their stuff together. And that's really been one of the wonderful things that has helped us.
Thank you, Anna. If you could pass to Jessica. Jessica, I would like to hear your experience with the foster care system. Can you share that with us?
Sure. I was placed in the foster care through the state of New Jersey when I was 18 months. I was adopted by my mom when I was 8, as mom. I personally had a good experience. I was in one home. My parents fought for me. It took 8 years. The system has changed since then. I had siblings. Actually, I was just visiting my biological siblings a couple weekends ago, and it was while I was there that showed me the importance of Christians fostering. I've said it, you know, to Elizabeth before, that if the church doesn't take care of the kids, the world will. And when the world takes care of them, they take care of them like they did my brothers and sisters who were abused quite badly. And I was not. I was put in a good Christian home, taught the love of Christ from, you know, my whole life. It's the only thing I knew. And they didn't, you know. If the church steps up and does it like the Bible asks us to, you know, these might be these kids' only chance to ever hear God's love, because they don't know what home they're going to go into the next. So for me, it was great. It was the best thing that ever happened, because it, you know, it gave me my family. But, you know, there's a reason why the church needs to do it, you know, and not necessarily the world.
Thank you. So now, Michelle, to you. I have some questions. What would you say to someone who's wondering if they will love an adopted child just as they would a biological child? What would you say?
That's a great question that I have actually been asked numerous times from many people, and it was a journey for me. When my husband and I began the adoption process, we were adopting. It was going to be a domestic adoption, and it was going to be a baby. And so there I am in Florida with this newborn baby. It's a whirlwind. You know, you get through all the paperwork, you're moving and grooving, and then all of a sudden you're there with this baby, and wow. And I love, you know, a child through adoption, and, you know, there she was with the most beautiful brown eyes, and she was looking at me, and I was looking at her, and, oh, yeah, I love this baby. She needed me, you know, I was what she had, and so, yep, I could love an adopted baby. And then we began our second adoption through, my daughter was going to be from China, so those fears were kind of, I felt like, yeah, I can do this. I did it once before and went through all the paperwork and read books and everything and learned that, you know, adoption was a journey. So I thought, great, let's get this journey going. So I'm doing my paperwork and all that, and then you wait, and then, you know, you get the phone call, and you have this baby, and she's beautiful, and you're praying, oh, you know, God protect her, angels watch over her, and then you get the phone call, you have to leave, you're packing your bags, you're heading out to China, and then you're in the room that's probably about this size, and maybe there was 50, 60, 70 babies, I don't even know. But there was my daughter at 11 and a half months old, and I knew it, that was her, among all the babies, and I was in love. She needed me, and I was everything she needed, and I was there for her, and we were in love. A few years later, we were called to adopt a 3.5 little boy from Ethiopia, and we had his picture, and he was beautiful, the most beautiful boy I think I ever saw, and went through the paperwork and going through the journey and getting ready to go, get on a plane to go to Ethiopia, and that, you know, get there, go to the orphanage, and there's this beautiful little boy, and I look at him, and he looks at me, and grabs my hand and walks away from everything he ever knew. And there we were in the hotel, like staring at each other, trying to relate. He doesn't understand me, I don't look like him, he doesn't look like me, and all my fears came true. I didn't love him. He didn't love me. And so we went home and began this process of, oh my gosh, how do I love an adopted child? And I would pray, God help me. And he went through a hard time. I mean, he left everything. He kicked and screamed and bit and hit my other children and ate out of the garbage and hoarded food and everything, all my fears. They were right here in my house. And I would say, help me love this child, help me love this child. And I went to the Word, and the Word says, love is patient, love is kind, love is not self-seeking. And I thought, I'm not that to anybody, not to any of my children. My kids needed me, and they made me feel good. So yeah, I could love that. But that's my selfish love. That was my fleshly love. They made me feel good. They made me feel like I was somebody, like I can do good, and he wasn't giving me that. But you know what? He didn't need my love. None of my kids needed my love. They needed God's love. And my journey from a relationship with God became desperate. I was desperate for him. It was no longer, little God help me. It was, Lord, don't put my feet on this ground until you fill me, because I can't be what they need. I can't show them your love without you. And so my journey of adoption began, my journey of love began, my journey with my children began, and it's still a journey. It's still a journey, and it's a wonderful journey. And I learn of my need for God more and more every day, and I'm desperate. But yeah, you can. With his strength, you can do all things. And all of those scripture verses came to life for me and became real. So you can. Thank you.
This is a question, hopefully, maybe more than one of you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That more than one of you can answer. Oftentimes, in some of the growth groups that we run, we have couples that come in, and one person really feels led to adopt, and the other one is not really sure that that's a calling that God has placed on their heart. So maybe more than one of you can speak to this, but what advice would you give to a couple where they're really not in sync at this time, and they're sort of in a different place?
See how fast I grabbed the mic? All me. And so, Reader's Digest version, in my bio, you see I was adopted. So, logically, as I grew up, teens, 20s, I said, yeah, one day I'd like to adopt. That'd be nice. Be the right thing to do, kind of pay back. So, here comes this thing in the mail, and all these kids' face from around the world, and my wife fell right in love. We talked about adoption. We had one biological child. We had some infertility issues, and she said, you know, you've talked about this. And I said, I know I've talked about it. It's different talking and then actually going forward with it. So for 3 years, for 3 long years, these brochures would come from one of these orphanages, and she'd circle and point and leave them on the table and say, how about this one? And I struggled. I struggled because I go back to what Elizabeth, I was comfortable. We had a son. I lived in an apartment in Brooklyn, 2 bedrooms. How am I going to do this? The doubt started to overflow my understanding that God had a plan. And it took 3 years, with my wife probably praying over me while I was sleeping, to touch his heart, that the words would become reality. And then one day, this brochure came again, and there were all these children, and I was sitting there by myself at the dining room table, and I just started to kind of weep. And at that point, God touched my heart. It took 3 years. So, not always will the couple be there day one, have the racing block saying this is what we want to do. It does happen. But when it doesn't, it takes time and prayer. And I would say, push the world and what they say away, because it's very easy to guilt yourself out of it, or just think you're above it all because you don't have room for this person or this child. But it's not true. So through prayer, through God really humbling me, not just at that process, but through the whole process of adoption, did he open doors for my son to come from Guatemala and us to be a family. And my son kept saying, Dad, we can adopt, Dad, we can adopt. And I said, I'm praying on it. So he'd say, well, if we're not going to adopt, can I get a dog? And so that weighed the issue, a dog or a child. But God led me in the adoption arena, and this is where we are. And so it does happen. I'm not surprised when couples come to me and say, my husband's not there. And that's usually, it's more the husband's not there. And I can relate, I understand. But God is persistent, whether we realize it or not. And if He set the seed in your heart to adopt or to foster care or to care for the orphans, that's going to come because He's in control. And you just got to sit back and wait, but continue to process it as you go. So.
Along the same lines as Chris shared, I can touch on. I also dragged behind for our first adoption. And my wife already knew that Lily was our daughter, because God told her. He hadn't told me yet. And she prayed and stayed silent, which is one of the only times that I can remember. But she knew that something as big as this, and powerful as this, and meaningful as this, could not be. She knows that if she shared her heart and tried to kind of push me in that direction, that the wrong reasons and motives may have been there. And so she prayed, and I kept shaking it off every day. I saw Lily's picture. And God spoke to me and said, this is your daughter on a different level, and said, take the step. And I said, and I questioned. I thought I was just hallucinating and imagining it. It took a couple weeks, and then finally I said, you know that one girl, and I knew it was God, because it wasn't someone that first glance that my heart drew, but God kept putting her on my heart, and God kept giving me the vision of Liliana. And finally I said to Elizabeth, I said, did you have any interest in that one picture? And she said, yes, she's our daughter. And that was it. And from that point on, we moved forward. And I think the simple point is, you have to be in unity. It's absolutely imperative. It's a very challenging, difficult process to go through, as it is. Many times, and this is now something in Miriam's heart we've seen, it is the husband that comes second with his heart. Many women are drawn emotionally and would take 100 children in if they could. But men sometimes, we're logical. We have to figure it all out. We don't allow our hearts to go there at first. And what we ask you to do as men is, we can be part of this solution. We have to be in unity. We have to pray and ask God to give us that same heart. But ultimately, once you're in unity, that's when you should move forward with the process.
Through the foster care system is one of the ways to kind of ease the other person into being interested in taking on a child. There are many different ways that you can help, and the age limits are also less constrained. We have a lot of folks who are empty nesters who go into foster care. It's like, you know, we haven't had kids, so we'd like to help. And being able to help there are many different ways. You can do emergency placements. So if a baby is born and the mother cannot take care of that child, and DYFS has not found a home for that child yet, you can be able to take care of that baby for a day or a couple of weeks until a home is identified. Also for the older children who are taken from their homes, you can help by just holding on to them for a short period of time. So there are some time constraints also for us when we're thinking about how we can help these temporarily orphaned children. And it's very needful and very helpful. We went the full fostering route, and I didn't take 100 kids, I took only 20. But it was, you know, each placement lasted a different amount of time. Our second placement was our keeper. But, you know, the first one was only a month, and it was, okay, well, this is kind of cool. We had fun, and she was able to go to her grandparents, and it was a terrific placement for her, and we were blessed, and she was blessed. Okay, God, what's next? And, you know, it just kind of went on a roll. Also, there are foster families who need vacation respite. Oftentimes they want to be able to take their immediate family on vacation and are not able to afford to take whatever foster children they have as well. You know, if I could take all 5 foster kids to Disney with my other 2, I would have, but sometimes that's impossible. So even being that kind of respite for foster families, it's a nice way of getting used to the idea of the adoption.
And we also have a question from the audience, which I think that maybe you could speak to. Their question is sort of, how do you deal with the pain of fostering a child and then seeing them return to a seemingly bad situation?
Yeah, that's the number one question for fostering. I know I have been blessed that all of the 19 children that I helped that didn't stay with us, they all went to very good situations. There were times where there were visitations with family members that weren't always good, but I was able to identify problems and speak to the caseworker. As a foster parent, you also get the opportunity to go to court to talk to the judge. You develop a very good relationship with the law guardian of the child that you have placed in your home and the caseworkers. Being as involved and vocal as possible is important in the whole relationship between the myriad of people that you have to deal with. It's always very painful to let go of a child, but you go into this knowing that that's what God has called you to do. He has called you to take in this needful little soul, to take care of them until He can work the rest of it out. And if you go into it with a heart like that, then you're able to get through that emotional upheaval that happens when the child is moved on. It is difficult, and I always hoped that my daughters would be at school when the caseworker would come so I could have my few hours to bawl my eyes out, and you know, we would do something together as a family afterwards, and just kind of re-knit ourselves and re-prepare ourselves. And then, I don't like to liken it to this, but you know, it's like call Diapers and say, okay, I'm ready for a new one. You know, we're ready, and you know that we've reset our souls to be prepared, and that's really the way that you deal with that situation. I mean, if you go into it saying, this first kid, this is mine, and keep it forever. Jackie's adoption, I got her when she was 2 weeks old, and it wasn't until she was almost 3 that the adoption was finalized, and there were many ups and downs. We could have potentially lost her a couple of times, but that was very emotional too. So in the whole adoption process, no matter how you're going through it, there's always going to be hills and valleys, and it's, you know, it's your faith, it's the partnership with your spouse and your extended family and your brothers and sisters in Christ that get you through it.
Great, thank you. And just a last question that I have is, what are some of the resources that some of you would suggest to folks that are considering adopting and fostering? Anything that comes to mind that you think are really valuable resources that they should pursue?
Yeah, the 2 big resources for us was Life Song for Orphans. They were very huge. They were even emotional support, you know, dealing with them. And Johanna's Hope, which I think is it might be a different name. Show Hope, okay. They were wonderful as well. They gave us a grant. But the resources within those organizations were very, very helpful, and other adoptive families.
I could just mention a couple books, and I know, Michelle, you know quite a bit about one of them, Connected Child, but adopting a toddler, we were recommended by Hope, toddler adoption, And you know, it's one of those that I had toddlers, so I didn't think, you know, why should I have to read a book about raising a toddler? And actually in our interview for Victor's adoption, it was like almost one of the prerequisites, although not any way to prove that we read it, she insisted. And then I did, and I saw why. It's many reasons, but one is attachment issues that you do deal with and challenges that you deal with a toddler, being brought an older child into your home, that raising a child that's biologic, that's a toddler, you just don't have. And it really guided us on how to handle, what to expect at certain ages, and then how to handle parenting them through those emotional challenges. And that is by Mary Hopkins Best.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
And then Adopted for Life, we did a study on it by Russell Moore. Great just to get the true spiritual adoption, and the reason that with God adopting us into His family, how that the natural next jump should be that we should feel natural to adopt a child into ours, and the whole idea of choosing to love a child quite like God chooses us into His family. And maybe Michelle can mention the Connected Child.
Yes, the Connected Child one. The other resource that was very helpful to me, there was a book, and it was the very first one that I had found in my library of books about adoption that was Christian-based, and that was Thriving as an Adopted Family by Focus on the Family. And then I called Focus on the Family, and in desperation. And I had weekly phone calls with a woman at Focus on the Family that prayed with me, that counseled me, that encouraged me through the very difficult time. So those were the two books. I didn't have The Connected Child at the time. I wish I did, but I do have to say, out of all the books I read and everything that I was prepared to expect, I got it all, and I wasn't prepared. I think I lived in this little state of, that's not going to happen to me. You know, God is calling us to do this. Look at that cute little face. That's not going to happen. And it did. So some of the knowledge was good to have, but emotionally, I don't think I spiritually prepared myself for it. I think I educationally prepared myself. I got all the resources I needed and prepared, but spiritually, I did not know my heart. And when the Bible says how wretched it is, that's what it is without Him. So I needed, really, I would like to encourage you, spiritually prepare yourself, because He's the only one that can really get you through whatever your journey is. And some of them are, and they're all wonderful, and some of them are easier than others. But either way, it's between you and, it was between me and God.
Thank you. If we don't have any other questions, that is our coffee fellowship session for today. You can see why our coffee fellowships have been so successful here at Jessica, please, sorry.
It's not a resource per se, but just
Okay.
a tip or suggestion, at least with
Yeah, please.
Idaho Expand Couple as the child, is to talk about it with them. If they want to know about their biological mother or their father or their siblings, it is going to be a natural part of them. Don't think they love you less because they don't. You're their mother, especially if you're, you know, my mom is my mom. I call my biological mother but by her first name, but I would ask her questions about her. When I went to see my family for the first time 1.5 years ago, my mother went with me. You know, so, but if they're internationally, interracially adopted, find resources for them to get in touch with their culture, because they do not feel different when they're really young, when they don't really, they see it, but they might not really know it, but when they're out, you know, I didn't really feel Hispanic until I got into community and people started talking to me and I had no idea what they were saying. Like, they just assumed. I'm like, do I wish I had known a little bit more growing up? Yeah, that would have been a great resource for me, but it wasn't something I thought about. So just, you know, as a resource, the children, just let them talk about it. Don't take it personal if they love me less. And, you know, and if they're a different culture than you, let them get involved in it too, so that they know about themselves and where they come from. So that was my
Yeah, thank you so much. Great. All right, so you are all dismissed. We have a wonderful lunch set up for you down the hall, so please thank you for coming, and we will see you. Please stick around because we have Kimberly Smith here to speak with you today, and you do not want to miss what she has to tell you today. Go buy her book on the hall, go have some cider, and we'll see you back in a little while.
Awesome.